click go live and then like hit the
Stream
banner?
is
It says
live.
we're live now. So how do I do the banner? See, I don't know.
This is why I
Brent,
had
did
my
I miss
camera off.
Okay, here it goes. Here it goes. There we go. See, isn't that a nice little intro to talk horror to me, Chrissy? We can talk horror together.
It did ease me into the idea of now listening to what may be upwards of an hour of conversation of horror. Yes.
I'm so sorry. You make it sound like you're like required to do this as a part of community service or something like that. So
no, I'm just letting skippers know what length of time they're in for. Also, because we set the goal of having a 30-minute time once, and we ended up going like an hour and a half. So
we should probably not talk
most of the movies, which I'm totally in for.
That should be our goal. 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Oh my gosh, yes, because these movies were long.
These are long movies. So without further ado, the question is, what movie did we watch? And what it comes down to is completely a trick question because we watched 2 movies.
Double feature.
Double feature. We watched The Shining and its I shouldn't say inevitable sequel, but Stephen King's attempt at a sequel, Dr. Sleep.
Why would it be an attempt at a sequel instead of?
Well, I mean, he attempted to make a sequel. I mean, it wasn't something like he wrote The Shining and immediately wrote Dr. Sleep. He waited many, many years and then was like, okay, let me attempt a sequel. And
this was published. It wasn't attempted. It was succeeded.
Well, but my thing is like, I could compete in a long jump competition and attempt to long jump. It doesn't mean I'm going to win or do well. It just means.
But did you already complete the long jump just a long time later?
I think we're splitting hairs here. You know, I'll admit I'm wrong just for the sake.
No, you don't need
everybody
to
being comfortable.
because
so. Sure,
I would say an attempt, and I would say a successful.
Already done, so wasn't it a successful completion? A successful
yes, it was.
publication?
I would say yes, it was, because then it's very different than The Thing, where The Thing was a prequel.
Right.
This is actually a sequel.
That's right. Okay, so this is a tried and true sequel to The Shining. So these are the 2 movies that we got to watch over the course of this last, I think, really 2 weeks. I think we gave it 2 weeks. I don't think we're longer.
Which is a good amount, like the proper amount of time, because these were both long movies.
Processing time for sure. So we needed a hot minute to do that. So I guess we're gonna go, I think, in order of the movies. Yes. So we're gonna hit we're going to talk about The Shining first, then we're going to talk about Dr. Sleep, and then we're sort of going to loop back around and blend both of those, conversations together into kind of one thing. So without further ado, should we watch the Shining trailer just so people are aware of what it is? Okay, so let me bring that into focus right here.
Nice.
So I think this is like, I was kind of saying, I think this is like a, 30th, almost 40th anniversary trailer, because it was 1980. Mm-hmm. This isn't the exact theatrical trailer or anything. Yeah, you could see a lot of those effects. So this was not the exact theatrical trailer or anything like that it came out, but it gives you a good idea of what you're in for. And yes,
it includes all those iconic shots.
Yes, they pretty much take, here's all of the big things. This trailer is almost like an expectation that you've already seen this movie. It's like, remember this, remember this, remember this.
Come play with us.
Perfect ending right there. Jack Nicholson laughing. Okay, so we're back here. So let's kick it off. Let's go straight to The Shining. As I said, 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick, very famously so. Runtime 2 hours and 23 minutes, which I will say this before I even get into the dollars and cents here. For a movie that's 2 hours and 23 minutes, and Dr. Sleep is even longer, both of those don't feel like it.
No.
Very well.
Uh-huh.
And you want to keep watching. So it does not feel like a movie that you're like, God, can this just get over?
And then there's no parts where you're like bored either. Like
Yes.
the whole time you're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's a reason why, and I know I told you this beforehand. That's why I was like, well, let's maybe not focus on Shining so much as Dr. Sleep, because the thing is, I feel like the people who've seen this have seen it, and there's a reason why so many people do like reviews or even just cinematic breakdowns on like certain shots and what certain things mean. Like this movie is really visual candy. Like it's great for the era. It's pretty incredible. The types of shots that they were able to accomplish, or at least Stanley Kubrick was able to accomplish. But budget-wise, it was on a budget of $19 million, and it pulled $47.3 million at the box office. And I've got inflation-adjusted numbers later to compare with Dr. Sleep, but it made some money. It made some money on its return, and that was pretty good at $1980. So,
yeah.
Not much to complain about. But at the same time, $19 million was a lot of money at the time too. It was a pretty big budget. So you would expect that they would have gotten something back with that. Would you like to go over the plot of The Shining, and I'll handle Dr. Sleep? I'm not sure.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, so this movie starts with this beautiful, like you were just talking about, of the cinematography of it, this beautiful aerial shot, and you're like traveling over this mountain view in the forest in wintertime, and you get to this beautiful hotel just in the middle of the mountains. And then this guy is getting an interview of like, hey, I came to be like the caretaker here, because you get explained that like the place closes down for the entire winter because it was built in a place that was like so secluded that it just financially doesn't make sense to keep it open over the winter. Like everyone just goes home for the season.
It was for plowing. They specifically said keeping the roadways clear.
Yeah, the cost of being able to do that and I think you really understand that when it took like a whole minute or two to do that aerial shot to get to the hotel, like it's showing it was away from everything. And then like he's having that conversation, he's going to accept the job. Everything seems like easy peasy. Like, is your family going to be cool hanging out here for the winter? Oh yeah, they'll be great. And then we meet the family, and it's a little boy and the mom, and the little boy has like an imaginary friend who he does a voice for kind of thing. And they're talking about like, oh, are we going to like living there? And then
it's a nuclear family.
It's like you just find them, and you're getting like the sense of kind of who they are and who everyone is. And then the boy has like a seizure, and you find out this background about the guy of how he was like drunk. And then we go back to the hotel, and from there, the rest of the movie basically takes place at the hotel. And it's these events of everyone's clearing out, and then the family's living there. Everything seems fine. There's a room that they're scared of. Oh, but before everyone left, there was this conversation between two of the guests where the boy was basically told, you have this kind of power where you can like telepathically know things or you sense things. And then so you see like these weird things going on with the boy throughout. The dad and the boy don't have a great relationship. Things start getting more tense. And then this room that like the boy is scared of, he goes into, and then he like gets hurt. And then the dad goes to check on it, and he sees some real freaky stuff. And then he starts encountering more like, I guess they're ghosts. And he starts drinking again. And then basically he's told that he needs to like correct his family. And he goes kind of crazy.
Which it should be noted that he was warned, the father was warned before he took this job, that there was another family that was a caretaker prior to this. And the father ended up axe murdering his family and then chopping them up into little pieces and stacking them on one of the bedroom beds. And slowly kind of throughout this movie, you start to notice that there's things not right with this hotel.
Yep.
And it very much so talks to the father and starts to manipulate the father. And I'm really the one thing that was kind of interesting that I always kind of forgot about was it jumps basically from the time that the hotel closes and they move in. It basically leaps forward like 3 months. So it kind of goes under this assumption that like they've already been there for a while, and you can tell the mom and the son are sort of getting along. They seem to be all right. It is, whatever it is, they're keeping busy with their time, but the dad is really struggling as a writer and just with focus and trying to figure out what to do. And I think that's where the hotel in itself starts to kind of eat away at his psyche and start to manipulate him. And kind of as he alluded to, meanwhile, the son seems overly aware of this, or can sort of see some of the things that his father is seeing, or some of these. I don't know if they ever really call them ghosts. Like they don't.
Right, and that's why I was like, are they
ever.
Ghosts? I'm not sure. These images, these entities.
They're kind of like past residents of the hotel in some form, but the hotel almost makes them take on their own persona, if you will. Like for instance, without jumping too far ahead, but for instance, the dad that ended up axe murdering prior the entire
previous
family,
caretaker,
he shows up as a waiter, as this big elaborate party kind of in the hotel. He shows up as this waiter and confronts the father and is talking to him, and is completely oblivious to anything he's talking about with the previous family and axe murdering and all of this stuff. So it's almost like the hotel sort of absorbs these past residences and
like holds them there.
Yeah, holds them there to play its own little kind of like game sort of thing. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So dad starts kind of going crazy. Son is aware. What goes on from there, Chrissy?
So then that's when it's this room that the chef who was like able to kind of talk to him through his mind without like actually saying words to him, and explain to him, you have this thing called the Shining, and you are like sensitive to things and can know things, and this boy is like, it's he's just so aware, like you said, of the father and how he's feeling, because he probably feels like whatever the hotel is doing to his dad, but also they had a strained relationship to start with. And so he ends up, like I said, going into that room that everyone was scared of, like the 237. And because was that where Grady had put the bodies of the kids he killed? Is that what it is?
I'm not sure if it's that specifically. You just know something happened in that room, because.
And then you want to tell about the scene of when the dad went in there to check what he saw.
I do. Well, it was as you kind of find out through Dr. Sleep. Spoilers. The son Danny saw the same exact thing. Basically, he saw a woman kind of in the bathtub. And the woman sort of gets out. She looks extraordinarily beautiful and naked.
Extraordinarily naked.
Yes, extraordinarily naked. And she's kind of wooing the father, in which I believe they share a brief kiss, and he
like sees, a kiss and an embrace.
Yes, and he sees the woman's back in the mirror, and it's just moldy and rotten. It's like a dead body has been soaking in a bathtub for a long time. And of course he freaks out, pushes her away, and he sees it kind of truly for what it is. It's just kind of grotesque monster. And from there he kind of returns, and I think he basically denies it, doesn't he?
He acts like he went in there and there was nothing in there.
Yeah, and so that's where it really starts to flip the switch, as like the dad is kind of going on the deep end. And there's a lot of, we'll talk about that kind of when we get into the, in fact, it may as well just like skip forward here. We'll kind of go through the characters. There's the perfect opening shot of them in the car, but there's a lot of close-up shots. They do a lot of, face directly in the center of the camera, close-up shots of these people. And they do it a lot on Jack Nicholson progressively throughout the movie, and you start to see him basically get more and more and more kind of crazy is such like a weird term.
He gets more like haggard throughout the movie.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy because this is like the very first shot, and you can already tell he's a little like on edge, right?
Yeah, so, because then you find out he was like, he used to be an alcoholic, and he changed that after he like, broke
his son's arm. I don't think they specifically say that he broke his son's arm in The Shining. He says he hurt his son.
Okay.
And in Dr. Sleep, you find out that he said, my father broke my arm once, and that was kind of the whole thing.
So I feel like this is the perfect shot of the relationship between these characters, where you kind of see how the dad, Jack, right?
Yep, Jack Torrance. Yep.
I was like, oh wait, that's his actual name, that actor. And so I was like, am I thinking that wrong? But then so his face is kind of that face of like evil, I guess.
He just looks like everything in the world annoys him.
Right. And then
like him against the world.
And then the way Danny's looking at him, like, I know what's going on in there, and I'm very suspicious of you and very wary of you, kind of thing. And then the mom's over there, and she's just like completely just oblivious to everything,
along for the ride
world. And I feel like you see that like almost immediately. And I think the beginning, like how I went pretty in depth of explaining who the characters were, because that's such a part of who this is, like how this movie develops is just knowing who the characters are and like how they interact with each other. Because like you even talked about how the mom and the son have a great relationship, and this whole time they're fine, where I think it's a thing of like immediately you see that she is already making excuses for her husband's behavior. Because when her son has like an episode, and it's after Tony showed him the blood coming from the elevator doors, and then like it's like Tony, his imaginary friend, who the little man who lives inside his mouth or whatever, who shows him that image, and then he like seizes. And then the doctor comes, and then the mom is talking about, oh, my husband. And like she asks about Tony, right? And then she talks about how he's had Tony for a few years, and that like school didn't really affect it. And then it didn't really matter because they took him out of school for a while because he got injured. And she like asked how he got injured, and she's like, well, my husband drank, and like, you know, these things happen, and he broke his arm. And it's like she totally uses everything.
That's what I'm saying. It definitely has that very like nuclear family dynamic of the father is the provider, the burden's on his back, it's everything else, and the mother is, it's like that's just how it is. And my job is to be at home and cook dinners and take care.
The perfect trad wife, right?
Yes. So that's what exactly whatever they would call it nowadays. But yeah, so that's kind of where that dynamic falls between all three of these people. Is you know, the dad was a teacher, and he's trying to become a writer, and so he takes this job, and he's saying it's perfect because I'm going to be able to not have anybody bother me and just write. And that's what slowly, I think, the house kind of leeches onto his energy and starts to eat away at him a little bit. I mean, ending wise, do we want to talk about the ending at this point before we kind of get into cinematography?
Well, where does the ending start? So I guess if we hit, where would the climax of the movie be, where then the rest is just whoop, here's all the ending to the movie?
Well, I will say this is definitely one of the movies that like it ends abruptly. Like it's kind of there's a lot going on, and it's like, well, that's the ending, right? This is not one that has a slow wind down.
No, it's like things happen, boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
Done.
Yep. And I think that's where the mother starts to get suspicious, and she starts confronting the husband. And then
because she finds what he was actually writing this whole time.
Yes, which is the famous all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And
just over and over,
writing it over and over
again
and over
in
and over
different
again.
paragraph formatting and everything, but just those words only.
Yes. And so even the mother starts to see things happening with the hotel, and she starts becoming aware of like stuff that's going on. And her primary focus, as it should be for any mother, is to save the child, save the children's. So she runs after, tries to save Danny, and the dad is now donning the famous axe, which the last caretaker had, and is going after them, essentially trying to butcher them. Which there's obviously the very famous shot of Jack Nicholson hammering the axe through the both the bedroom door and eventually the bathroom door, and his face coming into frame, which has a reference in Dr. Sleep, which I think is great. I love it. But yes, it ends up very much so with the dad chasing the family through the hedge maze, which I think part of the reason they did that was it kind of alluded to that, like, Danny and the mother went through the hedge maze kind of on a regular basis, like it was something they played in.
Yep.
And he had never been through it because he was always working. He was never had seen it, never been a part of it. So he trails Danny's footsteps in the snow. And Danny's smart enough to actually cover his tracks.
He like backtracks a little bit,
yes.
takes like a side route, and brushes away everything.
Basically,
he comes up and it's just abrupt stop.
Yes. Yeah, and it essentially starts to lead the dad kind of to his demise. He ends up not being able to escape the hedge maze and the thick of this massive snowstorm. And it leaves you with that perfect memed shot, which I wish I would have had.
It's just him like frozen there, and he has such like a look on his face that it's just like,
it's icicles.
Like he didn't expect it, and it's like, come on, you should have known.
You know, here's an interesting thing. I wonder if this is ever addressed in the book. Like, obviously, that body would have been there when they came in back during the summer. Whatever happened to his body? Whatever happened to Jack? Was there a funeral? Was it?
Because I'm trying to think, like, what happened after that. Because did it show? I'm trying to remember. Did it show them get away or like leave?
Yeah, I think they did in the snowcat that was brought up from the chef. The chef came up just to help him.
Right,
and he was talking to Danny.
Spoilers, because so he was told that Jack was told by Grady, the ghost figment man, like, your son is asking someone to come up and interfere. Basically, you need to take care of it. So we warned him that this guy was coming. While he and he went through a lot to get there. Like, he went on a plane, and then he was like chartering a car from someone and drove through like all these
snowcat. It's like basically a snow vehicle, right?
And he went past all these like accidents on the highway and stuff, and he made it there, and like immediately he gets axed and is dead.
Yep. So the one man that was kind of there to help Danny and the mother ended up croaking instantly, which is great. That's a twist you would not see coming, right?
No.
It completely flips the dynamic of what you'd have from that kind of hero tale.
And then it really shows just how like crazy Jack has gotten. Like, he just murdered someone.
Yes. Yep. Without remorse, right? It didn't even really think about it. It was just like, bam, here's an axe to the chest after I peeked my head out around the corner, and now I'm on to continuing to try to murder my family.
And the mom, there was a whole thing about like the radio out, and she had like made communication with these people, and then Jack goes and like destroys everything. So that
destroys the radio. Contact. Yeah.
And their cat that they had.
Yep. And their snow cat. Like, he pretty much went to prepare to keep them stuck at the hotel and murder them after the hotel influenced him to kind of do so.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. So, kind of from a cinematography standpoint, I bring this up because looking at screenshots, it's like, of course, the screenshots I find are of tight shots on people's faces, which when Kubrick really wants to express something. He does a lot. I mean, this is the best way to do it, but he leaves it up to imagination. He does a lot of showing the person's face without actually showing what they're reacting to. Like, for instance, even with Shelley Duvall here, the mother, this is before she even sees what's on, before you as a viewer see what's on the paper. It's just her reacting to what she hasn't been able to see this entire time. And that's what he's been writing. And so you get this really interesting kind of horror shot. You can see here's Jack Nicholson kind of deassociating with reality. He's just staring out a window, into a abyss. There's Danny on his, I don't know what they call it. I guess it's a trike. It's like a 3-wheeler or trike. Yeah. And he's riding through the hotel. And there's a lot of these really great shifting, moving shots through the hallways of him riding. And, there's some great cinematography in this movie. This is where I think some people struggle with it being as long as it is, and I think this is where like Stephen King had as big a problem with this as he did. Was this movie, while it does tell an interesting story, it's definitely an interesting story told by a really great cinematic director. And you can tell a lot of shots were made to be cinematic, probably not necessarily true to what the book had it posed as.
Like things were changed to make it more cinematically pleasing.
Yes, something you'd want to keep looking at.
Because I did read this book years ago because I love Stephen King, but it was like years ago. And from what I remember, there were hedges out in the like lawn, like something with a maze maybe, but I remember it being like different shaped hedges that were like a big part of it. And that was different in the movie. Like that's really all I can remember. I need to read it again.
It sounds like you need to read a lot of it again if you can only remember something about hedges. So yeah, I want to read it now too. That was one book that I never read. So I'm very, very interested in reading through that and seeing kind of what the differences are, because I've seen this movie so many times that I just, to not have read the book feels like a disservice. But then again, I did that with Jurassic Park, and it kind of ruined Jurassic Park for me because the book was really stupid good. So I don't know. Do I ruin the magic?
I recommend, if you want to enjoy the movie, watch it before you read the book, because if you read the book and then go into the movie, like movie,
picking apart.
This is my own hypothesis. Yes, you will always prefer the book if it's read before watching the movie.
Okay, all right. Well, I failed that, so I have to do the opposite of it. But anyway, okay. So anyway, it's kind of a nice cap so far, I think, on The Shining. I think we'll probably be talking a little bit more about The Shining as we start to talk through Dr. Sleep.
Oh yeah,
with a lot of connections. Then we're about 30 minutes in anyway, so we're hitting that good like
set upwards of, right?
Yeah. So the next thing we've got here is Dr. Sleep, and I can't remember. Do we want to do the trailer first, or should I just do?
Yeah, do the trailer.
All right, let's bring up the trailer. And to be fair, I have not seen this trailer. I went into this movie completely blind, knowing it was a sequel to The Shining, but I never watched the trailer for it.
When I was a kid, there was a place.
And the kind
I'm already like, what is happening? This is not what the movie is like.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting, and I knew it would do that. This all makes sense now, because without getting so much into the plot, before we can actually talk through it, the basic end sequence, the third act, the final chapter, because this movie's split into chapters, takes place at the Overlook Hotel. A vast majority of the movie is not there. It's not there. So the majority of the movie takes place elsewhere. And that's what I think is probably was maybe most misleading about this film for other people. I'm sure a lot of people thought like, oh, this is going to be a great romp. We're going to get the good guy and the bad guys, and it's going to be a brawl at the Overlook. I don't know what you would call it. But
I feel like actually we don't even see too much of Danny's adult character played by Ewan McGregor until like kind of the second act. Like he's not really a huge part until later on into the movie. And I think goes back to like, it's a lot going on, and they do a lot of back building so you understand the different dynamics of the characters and the events and how they come together.
I will say Danny is kind of the glue that ends up tying everything together, but he does not feel like the main character in the story.
No.
So he's definitely not the main like protagonist in this tale.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. He plays this role like extremely well. Like he's really good. Even both, because there's kind of a dynamic of where he is an alcoholic as well as somebody who's recovered from being an alcoholic for many years, and he plays it fantastically on both ways. So
no, this movie is really pretty.
Yes,
and it does a lot. Like you can see, they've shown a few of the shots that are like flashbacks. They didn't show any of the flashbacks, but they have flashbacks. But then at the end, when they're actually at the Overlook and it shows some of the things that were like from the first movie, like the twin girls and stuff, it's funny because it's like you almost forgive it a little bit for it not being perfect, because it's like, oh, well, it's a memory and memories fade a little bit and they look different. And you have to remember, like, this was made in 2019 versus how many years previously? 37? Is that 80? Or was it 80 or 82?
Yeah.
Like 34, around 40 years ago. Like it's going to be slightly different. And the new updated people, like, they look really cool. It's like real high-tech graphics.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I don't know. There's a lot to kind of unpack with this movie, because I feel like this is like The Shining is probably one of those that's been seen by a lot of people as like a horror classic, and I feel like probably not as many people have seen Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, and The Shining is like straightforward one plot, where Dr. Sleep is like many different things happening.
There's definitely like a few different things that tie together with this, and so I can run through the plot on this one real quick, and then if you want to do the numbers and stuff, we can do that. I don't know. What do you think?
Sure. Or I can do the numbers first, and then we can
do the numbers first. I think that's how we did it on The Shining. So you do that. Do numbers.
All right. So this was directed by Mike Flanagan, which I think there'll be a fun time for that later. And that's called, what is it called?
Foreshadowing.
Children. All right. Yeah. And this came out, like I said, in 2019. So pre-pandemic. And so it didn't have any of those restrictions that you'll get in the movies that came out in like 2021. And that's funny that you have to think about movies that way. But
pre and post pandemic films,
or during pandemic, it's like I could see The Shining having been a pandemic film because it was like a very close set. But
only a few people, takes place in a hotel that can be empty, which probably was empty during the pandemic.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
But again, this one was a few minutes longer than The Shining at 2 hours and 32 minutes. And it felt like it wasn't like, oh my God, this is a long movie, but it felt just like a lot happened in that amount of time. So, I mean, I think the 2.5 hours is very fair. So this budget was higher, it's 45 to 55 million, and it did make quite a bit at 72.3. So I'd say those numbers are a little closer than The Shining's numbers were, but it's still I mean, I don't understand millions, so to me, it seems good.
So the thing, there is a rule of thumb when it comes to like budget numbers and money, is that marketing is usually it can't, like, again, rule of thumb, it's not always this high, but marketing is usually double the budget in some cases. So
so if you don't at least double it,
so that's where, like, at least most movies consider, like, if you don't double your budget or more, you basically a failure per Hollywood terms. So
I wonder if they saved money on marketing, because I don't remember even.
I don't remember any marketing. You're right. Yeah, that's probably how they saved money.
Oh, they're good. They're good.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll get into more kind of the numbers, the compared between both of them, and the inflation in a little bit here. But yeah, so Doctor Sleep is a direct sequel to The Shining. It takes place while Danny is now older. I don't know if they specifically give his age, because I think the movie kind of starts with him in I don't want to say it's like the 90s, because there's an 8-year jump at some point for his sobriety, right?
Yeah.
So it either way, I mean, it starts with him 8 years younger than he ends up in the movie. And he's in a pretty rough position. He's definitely following in the same footsteps as his father. He's an alcoholic. He's drinking, he's partying, going nuts. And you kind of find that one of the primary reasons why he's drinking is to sort of numb the Shining, numb the ability to, you know, kind of block out his past, essentially. And in parallel to this, you start to see a group of people that are named the True Knot, that basically hunt. I almost said force sensitive, because I don't know what else to call it, especially with Ewan McGregor. They're force sensitive, but sort of hunt other people that have shining abilities, if you will.
And children. They hunt children.
Children specifically, which is pretty gross. And there are definitely some like scenes that make me uncomfortable now having a child of my own. And so this was one of those that I loved this movie, but I didn't go back and watch it for the longest time because I didn't want to see those scenes again.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this group called the True Knot basically hunts these shining sensitive people, these children, because they haven't necessarily honed their abilities yet, and they can get them quite easily. And they basically torture these people so it releases their essence that they call steam, and that's what they feed off of. And as long as they can feed off of this essence, feed off of this steam, they can basically live forever. They can use their abilities and live forever. So these they almost look like gypsies. They're kind of like a traveling band of people. They just live in trailers and motorhomes and can live for a very, very long time.
Dressed in a very bohemian style.
Yes, very bohemian, very gypsy-ish style. And they even allude to one of the people having lived to see empires rise and fall. Like, they've been around for a very, very long time, hundreds, if not thousands of years, doing this process. I think a direct comparison would almost be like vampires. But
yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
But they have to, the difference is that they have to hunt a very specific prey. They can't just bite any old human.
They're like cannibalistic vampires. Like,
in a way,
hunt their own kind.
Yes, in a way. Now, the interesting thing about this that I think they kind of show throughout the movie is that they don't have to do this. You could be like Danny and have the shining ability and just live a normal life. But basically the thing is once you start to feed this way, the moment that you start to live off the essence of other people's shining, there is no going back. You must continue to live off of that essence. Otherwise you will cease to exist and perish, basically. And so, anyway, so these people are kind of on the hunt, and it comes across that there is this girl that is extraordinarily shining sensitive. She's very, very powerful. And she ends up latching on to Danny, kind of at one of the lowest points in his life. He's going through Alcoholics Anonymous. He sort of ran away to a new town to start over. And she started connecting with him over, this long distance, just kind of using the shining. Well, at one point in time, she uses her abilities, and somebody from the True Knot senses it. Their leader senses it, can figure out where she is, and she goes, I think I know what our next target is. The Danny is very much so like, hey, probably shouldn't talk to me. Like, I'm not a great guy. You need to stay quiet, not worry about this stuff. And the the True Knot starts to kind of making their moves. They start putting out feelers, trying to figure out what they've got. And I think the big plan that they eventually reveal is like, hey, maybe we should stop trying to do these one-off kills. And this person is so powerful that we could just keep them alive, torture them, and milk their essence for as long as we possibly could. Milk their steam, if you will, for as long as we possibly can. And which is really gross when you think about it, because basically they want to hold a child hostage and torture them for as long as they possibly can, just so they can continue kind of engorging themselves and you know, all of that the world has to offer. So this is where
her little phrase she says, eat well, live long.
Something like that. Yes. There is something like that she says. I remember she tries to sell Danny at some point too.
At the end.
You can live without not regret, but without I don't know. The word's going to escape me now. But so she tries to sell him on this ability that you can be young now and forever be young. You never have to get old, and you can eat whatever you want, and you'll never get fat. You know, all these other things. So this is where your threads kind of start to merge. The True Knot is looking for this girl. They're aware, and they kind of want to start making moves. And Danny is chatting with this girl and trying to basically warn her, you know, hey, don't be messing with these folks. Don't be interacting with them by any means. And where it really turns is that I guess the people of the Shining have the ability, they call them lookers, that once the True Knot ended up murdering one of these children, harvesting the steam, she was basically looking at them, watching them do this from the distance. And they honed in on that and said, hey, somebody's watching us. There was somebody who was watching. They saw it, whatever. And they're extremely powerful, so we got to go find them. And so this is where kind of everything starts to merge. Danny eventually is like, hey, you need to stop trying to talk to these people, luring them in, trap them, do whatever you're trying to do. And you like need to run. You need to like forget all of this, and like they're gonna keep trying to come after you, so like stop messing with them. And they eventually meet up. And Danny happens to have a great friend that just somehow sort of like believes him. And let's see, we'll pull up the characters here.
Well, he took a long time like going through his sobriety. Like this guy was like his person who supported him through it.
Yes, he was his sponsor, basically. It was a sponsor. He set him up with a place to live and got him in with the AA group and a job and everything else. But it's played by this gentleman, Cliff Curtis, which I feel like he's one of those guys. He was great in this role, but I feel like he's one of those guys that you've seen in other things, but you might not know, you know, him specifically or some of those other things that you've seen him in. So Cliff Curtis there, he's his buddy, and he kind of tells him, he's like, hey, I got to go do this thing. It's pretty messed up, but I need you to sort of ride along and trust me. And so they go to look to verify that what the little girl saw was true, that there was this group of people and they murdered a child and whatever. And so they do that, and they dig up the body and they find it, and they go, holy hell, this thing is like real. These people are real. This is like bad news bears. Like maybe we shouldn't do that. So they go to meet up with the girl next and to sort of say like, hey man, we got to come up with a battle plan. We got to figure this out. And sure enough, you know, it's already kind of starting to hit the fan. They're closing in, and basically they set a trap for the True Knot.
It's a trap.
Yeah, it's a trap. So they set a trap for the True Knot to kind of fight them, try to take them out because they think they're horrible people and they should not live anymore. And which they successfully do. I'd say they knock out 90% of their encampment.
There's just the main lady and who's played by Rebecca Ferguson.
Yes.
And then her like number one person who basically she like looks and sees where things are, and he kind of leads everyone to go get them. And so it's just them two left, but they're not together.
She calls him like her raven or something.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's what she calls him. Yeah. So yes, they murder basically 90% of the encampment, which all of these people kind of have special abilities that help capture these children and harvest their essence. And she sends her basically number one. I think it's like her lover, right? Like they're, I think, romantically entwined.
Well,
positive.
I think it's kind of that thing of like when you've been alive for like so many decades and centuries, like you gotta every once in a while, you know.
Like everybody's kind of just, you know, dipping into the honey pot kind of thing. Okay, gross. Anyway, so he gets a hold of the girl. Danny kind of sets a trap of his own and ends up taking that guy out too. So it leaves nothing but Rebecca Ferguson, who is the leader of the True Knot, and her name is the Hat. They just call her the Hat.
Yeah.
And Danny and the little girl, which I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Do you remember what her character's name is? Now? It is Abra?
Yeah, because she would always talk. There was at her birthday, there was a thing that said happy birthday. And then she would talk about like how she had magic, because there was a whole background on her. Like when it did the different stories, like we met the Hat and her kind of crew and saw them kill a kid. And then we saw that a few times. We saw Danny kind of go through his journey through sobriety and getting a job actually where they referred to him as Dr. Sleep, where he worked at
it's a nursing home or like a hospice style facility. Yes.
So he would kind of be there and comfort people on their way out and stuff. And and then
he could help put them to sleep. He could make it like a sleep.
Right. And then Abra, like it's kind of her as a kid and her parents like being freaked out by like her being able to continue playing the piano when she was up in bed, or like just knowing things, and you get this understanding of like she just thought she had magic. And she has, I think, was it like basically the same skill as the Hat, where like they were able to get into the other person's mind and like project themselves other places as well.
Yeah, I think that's I don't know if they specifically say like, oh, you're like me,
like the same type kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And that's something that I'm curious to if the book alludes to a little bit more, because this story very much so gets a lot more into like different abilities, almost like different people who have the Shining have different capabilities of using the Shining that others don't. And so they like the True Knot very much so specialized in what people could or couldn't do. One of the people that they recruit is called a pusher. She could tell people to do things and they could do them to themselves or do whatever they were basically told. So there's definitely a lot of these like other abilities that you haven't heard of, or the original was not at all about.
Yeah. Didn't explain really that beyond like telepathy kind of stuff. But then there's the thing where there's so many other things, I guess, just like events that happen without going play by play, like bullet point. This is everything that happened. That pusher you just mentioned ends up before she dies, because when they ambush the group and like shoot all of them, she gets one last command out before she dies.
Her final words.
And she says, "Go kill yourself" or something.
Yeah. I think she says shoot yourself, and Cliff Curtis' best friend immediately shoots himself and kind of expires, if you will. And so that's where it kind of ends up, and it leaves, you've got Danny, you've got Abra, and you've got the Hat, which is remote. She's in another place. So Danny says, I've got a plan. I know how we can end this. You just have to come with me. And so they end up traveling to Colorado to the Overlook Hotel. And you kind of start to piece together that Danny's plan is to get the Hat in the Overlook, sort of unleash the hotel on her, the beings, the creatures, the apparitions, whatever they are, and let the hotel kind of just rip her to shreds.
Well, in one
feed off of her.
Right. Yeah. He's like, we're going to go to this place because it has like things just as bad as her kind of thing. But earlier in the movie, like before Danny starts his sobriety journey, we see a lot of what was his name? Doc Halloran, the cook from the first movie who gets killed. He still comes and talks to Danny and like kind of guides him of like one person he was trying to steal money from the wallet of a woman he was with, like who was still sleeping, and his like mentor in a way shows up of like, really, that's what you're gonna do right now, like be more aware, and kind of guides him. And so they are still able to communicate even though he's gone. And you'll see that again later in the future too in the movie. And it's he teaches him this skill of putting things in a box, like all the things that were still haunting him from the Overlook, just trap them away so that they can't control you. And that helps him kind of hide his shine too, and not.
That includes memories as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
sorry, go ahead.
No, all you.
So then another aspect that ties into that is that there's a few scenes where Abra allows the hat into her mind, and she starts thinking she's being sneaky and going through files, where really Abra kind of trapped her and got into her mind to see stuff that she had hidden away.
Yeah. So that's where I think that's kind of like, it's that childlike ability of somebody that you almost get into like a, I almost said Dennis the Menace, but like a Home Alone type situation where it's like, I can set my traps. I can get rid of these burglars myself.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's where Danny kind of steps in. That is like, no. You just opened a can of worms. Now they want you even more because they know what you're capable of.
Yep.
And they're going to come after you, like, for sure, in full force. And so this is like Danny in a way is kind of coaching her, but he doesn't really have that opportunity. There's not a lot of time. Once the ball really starts rolling, he doesn't get to be that mentor level that the chef was. He just kind of has to protect her in a way, or act as a protector. And he kind of wants to end it all at the Overlook. He thinks he can take her out and take the hotel with him, and maybe provide some closure on his own.
Bringing out the big guns, because he knows that this lady is never going to stop hunting them now that she's aware.
That's right.
So they get to the Overlook.
Yeah, so they get...
He goes in on his own to start.
Yeah, well, first, it should be noted, because that's a part of their plan, and I'll bring it up here just from the cinematography standpoint, but it's a part of their plan to not necessarily press the nuclear button, right? The first part is to like, hey, maybe we can just trap the hat in a box. We can get her in our little instance of The Shining, and we can use the box method on her, lock her up, and that's it. She's done for. She's just kind of in Danny's memory, or I don't know. I'm not exactly sure if that was supposed to be Danny's memory or if that was supposed to be hers. I think it ended up being Danny, because she wasn't even really aware that he had the Shining or the ability at that point.
Yeah.
So they do an Inception moment.
Yes, that's right. They trick her because so like he goes in and wakes the hotel up first, but as soon as the hat comes, Abra goes in, and then he's kind of there separating them, but she really doesn't know who he is, or he's not really on her radar. And then they go into what the hat thinks is Abra's mind.
And Abra's kind of toying with her. She's trying to cut her up with a knife, and
it looks like the maze from the Overlook. The
hedge maze from the Overlook. And they lead her on a little bit. She chases them through the hedge maze and everything. And Abra's doing her thing, but basically Danny tries to sneak up on her with one of the chests to lock her up, and she catches onto it, kind of knocks everybody out of this haze, and sort of realizes that Danny has abilities too, and that she was not aware of this. So it's kind of an interesting attempt, to end the movie, but obviously that would not be an entertaining ending. So it continues on. It's the plan B, and the plan B is basically what I would consider that nuclear switch. It's Danny lets the Hat kind of come in close, and he unlocks every single one of the Overlook inhabitants that have been haunting him over the years, or coming after him over the years, to let them run free in the hotel again, and basically capture the Hat and feed off of her. Which, spoiler alert, successfully works. They feed off of her and rip her to shreds, basically.
But that fight scene, up until like he gets them and releases all his like memories and stuff on her, that was an intense scene, because it brings back where like she's trying to talk him into joining her, and he's like, why? Because you're alone now? Like, that's why you're offering it to me. And it's like, shoot, they did kill every one of her companions, but deservedly, because they were killing children. Like, come on.
Well, and that's kind of the interesting thing too, is there's more depth to that, because even the Hat says, like, what, you think we're the only ones in the world that do this? Like, there are others that are actively doing this, right? You don't know the scale. You don't know if there's a leader or some other organization, or you don't have any context to that, but it's like, it's very aware that these people kind of travel in packs and do their thing.
Yeah. And then they physically fight with the axe.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. They, like, hurt each other.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of gross.
Yeah. I was like, this is really vivid.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. So they go down that path. The ghosts immediately eat up the Hat. And unfortunately, the ghosts start to turn on Danny. Yeah, and so Abra's kind of running away at this point. He told her just like, hey, when this stuff starts flying, get the F out of here. Like, go, run. And now the residents, the apparitions, what have you, of the Overlook are starting to feed into Danny. They're starting to sort of take over him, which is kind of interesting, because he sort of assumes that final role of his father, in which he kind of, now he's got the axe, he's limping through the hotel chasing after Abra and wants to rip her to shreds, kind of thing. So thankfully prior to the Hat showing up, there's a couple little sequences that are great. You can kind of tell that Danny knows the moment he unleashes things, it's going to get real messy, and he's probably not going to get out of there. So he sort of booby traps the boiler to set off and burn the hotel down. There's also some rehashing scenes of like him going back past the room that he stayed in, and there's still the axe smashed, holes or whatever in the doorway where his dad was coming after him. And there's actually a really interesting scene, which, oh man, I didn't get a slide of that. I have the images for it too, but I didn't get a slide of it. Is of he has a conversation with his father. His father is now the bartender. Yeah, his father's now the bartender. Obviously has no reference to who Danny is or what's going on, and Danny is completely aware of this. He knows that this person will have no recollection of it or know anything, but he basically used this as an opportunity to spill his guts and come to terms with, almost forgive his father in a way. I think that's basically kind of what he does, is he sort of convinces himself that, he understands why things happened. And, he has that sort of father-son moment, even though it doesn't matter. He's basically talking to a wall. It's a self-reflection moment. And even he really, the struggling alcoholic that his father was. So it was pretty great to go through that and see that. And the actor who played young Jack Torrance, his father, while he doesn't look 100% like Jack Nicholson, he was very close. he looks very, very close to Jack Nicholson in The Shining, and it was really great sequence in my opinion.
And I think that was even all the flashbacks from the beginning of the movie too, where it showed like Danny with his mom and the doc, and like it showed just scenes at the Overlook, and it was off again. It wasn't the same thing. It was different actors, and it was made with current technology, so it looked a little different. But to the point where you were like, no, this looks really good. Like having just finished The Shining and then go right into that, like this looks really good.
Yeah, for just like, and you know, they kind of, as you're saying, there's like the shot is basically from the side. There's not really like head-on face shots or anything like that. So you pretty much more or less get sort of the ambience of the situation, I suppose, on what you would expect. You know, obviously the guy doesn't sound exactly like Jack Nicholson, but that would be pretty hard to do. There's not many people who do sound like exactly like him. But anyway, it's just it's a great sequence. It's a great like cooler before the big fight. You know, there's this warm up to the hotel, which is very eerie and interesting. And him sort of walking down memory lane, no matter how horrific that may be, he gets to go through that process. And you know, it kind of sort of seems like the one soul that was still there, if they're even considered souls, like the one soul that was still inhabiting the hotel was his father. It was the person that, you know, he didn't have to lock away or whatever, and that's all that was left. So the bartender is now his father and has just been there waiting and bartending and doing whatever. So yeah, great little sequence. So I think to sort of continue on, you know, Danny is now kind of possessed. He's struggling to maintain being Danny versus doing what the hotel wants him to. He's chasing after Abra. Abra's in that like, but no, Danny, no, you're my best friend. Fight it kind of, you know, mentality, which basically does not work. It works for a minute, just enough for him to say, keep running, get the hell out of here, don't worry about me. You know, Danny sort of ends up finishing the job by going to the boiler, saying his piece, and if you want to say burning down with the Overlook, burning it all down, watching the world burn.
Well, you question it at the end if he got out or not, because Abra's standing out there as it's burning down, and the like you can hear sirens coming, and then it cuts to her talking, and it kind of does a similar shot like in The Shining where it's just showing her talking. You can't see who she's talking to, and then it shifts and you see Danny standing in a room talking, and you're like, oh wait, he made it out. But then you find out, no, he's just kind of an apparition, kind of like Doc was at the beginning, and he actually did die in the fire at the Overlook.
Yeah, because I think that's basically, she has sort of one of the last lines to her mother. She sort of says like, Mom, just so you know, like life goes on after you know, you die or whatever, because they lost their father.
Yeah, because her dad was killed by the Raven when he went to go get her, right?
Yes. So that's where he was trying to protect her. And so that was kind of the whole thing, was that like life goes on, and she knows this because Danny's like there in the afterlife, I think. Sort of coaching her, talking to her, and going through that whole process of things. So and I mean, it's like it really sucks to be like, and there's a heartwarming ending, because it's like there's kind of not. Basically everybody you knew in this movie died, with the exception of one person. You know, whether the people that died you liked or not is a different story, but they all perished in some way or another. A vast majority of the characters in this movie were bad people. They were people that murdered children to steal their essence and live forever, right? So there's a lot of just like, I don't want to paint it as a picture of like this movie is just nothing but a bunch of like murder and death and sadness, but there's definitely like a hint of that. There's a strong whiff of all of that over everything in this movie. I think it basically does come to terms of, you know, it's kind of three things in my mind. There's Danny, you know, coming to terms with his life, being an alcoholic, fighting that, not wanting to be the same thing that his father is, eventually assuming the role of a mentor while Abra's kind of coming of age, honing her abilities. And then, you know, you've got this group of bad people that basically want to interfere and take that away at their selfish benefit, right? And those are sort of the three threads that kind of intertwine
absolutely
throughout this movie. Do you have anything to say before I think, because now I think we're going to start getting into like
let's compare them more closely now.
The numbers and things like that.
Yes.
So some of this is kind of the data you already saw. You know the directors side by side. One was 1980, one was 2019. Which, gosh, if you think about that almost was 40 years apart. That's crazy.
Yeah, 39. Yeah. That is
so
crazy.
39 years apart between these. Which I guess Ewan McGregor's probably the perfect age to maybe play that role, like from being a child to where he's at now, because he's got to be 50 something, right?
Yeah, I'd say late 40s, early 50s.
There's no way he's in his late 40s. I think
I'll give it to him.
I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a hottie with a body. Yeah, he's 53 years old, born in 1971. So that kind of almost fits perfectly in the canon of things. Movies, almost very similar run times. Shining was 2 hours 23 minutes. Dr. Sleep is about 10 minutes more. Again, I think both of us would agree that neither of these movies feel like they are that long. They're great watches.
Yeah.
A lot of fun watching them.
Whole way through.
Yeah. Okay, so here's where we start getting into the budget. So if you look at the budget, in $1980, it was $19 million. Adjusted for inflation, and I have 2011 here. 2011's wrong. It's actually by 2019. So I apologize. I need to correct the slides. But in 2019 dollars, to compare apples to apples, it's about $59 million. So technically, the budget of The Shining was more than Dr. Sleep was.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was really interesting is I read a quote from the one of the cameramen on The Shining. They were talking about the kind of like the helicopter shots in the beginning and other stuff. But he said when they started that movie, the studio was just like, yeah, do whatever you want. Like they had no restrictions at all. And so Kubrick was very much like, we're going to go nuts and film all these different things. So there was definitely some studio buy-in to just like do whatever. Here's money. Enjoy.
Yeah. Carte blanche.
Yes. So budget-wise, it was basically more than Dr. Sleep. Now at the box office, adjusting that 47.3 million that it took at the box office, adjust to about 148 million in those 2019 dollars.
Double.
It's I mean, that's what's
double. Yeah.
That's what's crazy about it. Yeah, it's more than double. So The Shining made good money for the era. I'm sure everybody was very happy with that. And that's not even to mention 40 years of Blu-ray and DVD and VHS and TV syndication and all this other stuff that it probably recouped over the years, right? And so Dr. Sleep was estimated between a $45 and $55 million budget, and it netted around 72. So unfortunately, this is kind of as I was explaining, this would have been considered a box office failure after marketing and everything. You'd probably be pretty lucky if it broke even, really. So either way, that being said, money's not everything. And I don't know if this was the movie that we needed, but I'm glad we got it, I should say. Because I thoroughly enjoyed it. After watching it through a second time, I was like, yeah, you know what? I really do like this movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good things about it. Should we get into what the rest of the world thought about it before we say what we thought about it?
And then we'll say what we think.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Here we go. So, audience scores. We kind of compared, because it's sort of the easiest, kind of compared Rotten Tomatoes along with Metacritic. Surprisingly,
I am surprised.
These are fairly close.
Yeah.
Fairly close.
I guess the people who saw Dr. Sleep liked it.
Yeah. So I think they noticed those comparisons, and again, Dr. Sleep, it does not feel like the same movie that The Shining is, and I don't think it was meant to replicate that pacing, the type of horror and things of that nature. Dr. Sleep is a very different film. It is a lot less like condensed story-wise. There's a lot more that goes on, but it is still a very well shot film, and the type of movie they were trying to make. Like, it looks really great.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of fantastic shots in there. Definitely the Return of the Overlook is like a highlight. Anybody who likes The Shining will like that sequence. I think that was really, really great. They said they spent a lot of money and time replicating that to a T. Like, they had to rebuild those sets.
Even like the typewriter and all that. It looks
the carpet.
Good.
The carpet, the zigzaggy, the octagonal orange and black and yellow carpet. Yeah, like it's
the
nuts.
Gold and pink.
Yes.
Wendy's favorite colors.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So yeah, I mean, just overall from a critic standpoint, 59 compared to 64, those are very, very close in terms of numbers. And the audience score also extraordinarily close, an 89% versus a 93. One thing that I do find that's interesting, though, you can see the ratings. There's 89% verified rating out of 5,000 plus verified ratings for Dr. Sleep. 250,000 plus ratings for The Shining. So to be at a 93% and have that many people rate your movie is, gotta feel good.
Pretty high, yeah.
So Stanley Kubrick, good job, I guess. I don't know what I was getting at with that, but yes, and the Metacritic, fairly same thing. The Shining rated, definitely a little bit higher.
Too far off.
But not too far off. That's right. So I think both of these are very close in nature. I liked both of them, even though they feel like different films. They tie into each other very closely, and I think they're both great. So I don't know, Chrissy, what did you think? What is your final gut on these? Let's start with The Shining. Let's start with the OG. Okay. Let's start with The Shining. Yes.
So I'd seen this movie before a long time ago. Yep. I've read the book before a long time ago. Don't remember a lot of them. So watching it again, I was like watching it anew, and I'm like, I don't remember any of these things. I don't remember them even talking about The Shining. Now I understand why it was called The Shining. So it was like watching it for the first time, and it was prettier than I remembered. I really enjoyed watching it. It really like pulled me in. I liked the plot. I like the pacing. I like the characters. Trying to remember like the soundtrack, and it's that because they replicated it in Dr. Sleep. There were like pieces that they pulled in. Yeah. And so I like enjoyed that, how it really put you in.
Which I will say, not to even cut you off, because we didn't really talk about the music a whole lot.
No,
but
not at all.
They did not. They chose to use that at the right time in Dr. Sleep. They did not weave that into the general soundtrack through the whole movie. It was like basically the moment that you crawl back to the Overlook Hotel. Yeah. That's when that fanfare hits again, and boy, does it pay off. Boy, is it great. I love that.
No, it's great.
Go ahead.
And there were just a few things, though. It's like I would like to understand better the ending. Like, we didn't even talk about the picture where it shows everyone in the gold room or whatever, and
he's just Jack a part
Nicholson, of it. Like Jack's in it, and it was from 1921, and it's just like, what? Like, is this just rewriting history? Because then he shows up as the bartender, and it's like, so he's like trapped there now, kind of thing. And it's like changed now, or was it always like that? Has this picture always been there? So there's little things. Oh, we didn't even talk about Red Rum.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean,
and that just because it's so iconic. Ooh, sorry. Just because it's so iconic with The Shining, but it's a thing of like that was another mirror trick. So there was a lot of cool cinematography stuff.
Well, I gotta wonder how much of that's in the book. That's the one thing that
right, and that's the thing where
I want to read it.
Exactly. I'm like, there's still just a lot of things missing for me from The Shining. It was fine. It was good. I would give it a 7.
Okay, I get you.
Like, ugh, like cringy, scary ghost, or like they use the N-word, and I was like, not expecting that.
Yeah, so that's kind of the interesting thing about this, because obviously looking at a movie that's 40 years old versus one that's a couple years old or 5 years old now, I guess, not even, but close, it is such a hard thing to compare to, especially because it's not an against one another thing, right? It's against time, if anything.
Yeah.
And I was kind of saying this before. It's like you got to wonder what Stanley Kubrick, if he had the opportunity to film The Shining today, what that would look like in terms of, would it be the same movie, just
right,
higher definition or something, or would it be something else? I don't know, no idea. So I get, though, at the time, I mean, I can't think of another movie that was like this. I mean, I can think of another art house or artsy style films from the 1980s or even the late 70s, but something like this, especially an adaptation of something else, like, no way. There's a lot of really great shots. There's a lot of things that expand on the world, I think, really well. But you know what? Like, I feel like there are probably other things that I would go back and watch sooner rather than The Shining.
Yeah.
And my gut is kind of sitting at like the 7 range, but to be completely honest, I think 8 is fairly fair.
Okay.
And part of that is just because of the again, I think it's really difficult to compare something that's 40 years old. They worked with what they got, and they did extraordinarily awesome things with it. So yeah, I'm thinking at kind of like 8 great party ha's, out of 10. That's kind of where I'm thinking I'm at with The Shining, I think.
Yeah. So then to look at Dr. Sleep, I did enjoy this movie a lot more. I think I liked it that there was a lot more going on. I liked, again, the characters in it. Like, everyone is perfectly cast. The acting in this was beautiful. The costuming was great. Like, I really got a sense of like who the people were without having there to be like this whole explanation of background. You just like knew. And I feel like they did a great job making a 2.5-hour movie, a movie that I would go back and watch again. And they did a lot of things very well. I can think of a few things that they didn't do well. Like, I'm struggling to be like, here's what I would change a lot. I guess just more Ewan. I mean, every movie could use more McGregor. Sure. So I'm going to give this one a 9, and this one's going to be I know. And it's going to be like what kind of 9 am I giving it? I'm scared, but also it's pretty. So it's kind of ooze. I don't really know how to react to this, but I like it. I don't like it.
9. I'm scared, but I'm pretty. I'm uneased but intrigued. Yeah. I get you. Okay, all right, a 9. Yeah, I think so. Kind of where my head's at. One of the reasons why I think this movie is definitely an enjoyable watch is because it expands. I hate to even like use this term, but it kind of like expands on the universe of The Shining, right? Like, it's The Shining very much so. You know what? Here's kind of a perfect example. The way I'd pose this: The Shining is the original Star Wars films, right? You're aware that there's this thing called the Force. There's no real details about it. Who gives a crap? It doesn't really matter. It's sort of irrelevant. There's people that use the Force, and you just know that, and those are the people. And that's how it is. Things happen. Dr. Sleep is very much so like the Star Wars prequels. It's like, hey, and maybe this is a really bad analogy, so stop me at any time. But I mean it more in the description of the Force, that it's like, oh yeah, there's a Force there, there's not only 3 people in the universe that have this Force ability. There's many different uses for the Force, right? There's both good and bad. There's young and old that use this stuff, and it really sort of like opens up the doorway to be like, whoa, this thing that was very niche and kind of almost even a throwaway thing. It was almost just a kind of a small plot point to sort of inject spookies and visions and stuff. It's like, no, now there's a big world where there's multiple people that have this and they all use it in different ways and whatever. So it's got that kind of effect. And it was like, oh, this is interesting now, because it's interesting to see what people do with this kind of stuff and how it's abused and all these different things. So anyway, long story short, cinematography was awesome. I would say it's on point with the original Shining. I think it works really well. Obviously different movies. The Overlook ending had so much opportunity to go so wrong, to just be pure like fan service garbage. And you could tell they like eased off of the gas pedal a little bit on that. And I admire them so much for it, because I love that sequence, and I did not want them to just go complete fan service garbage with that. That being said, I think I'm basically in the same exact boat that you are. I think this is a 9. I'll give it 9. I don't know where do I want to go with this. There's so many different.
Right, this one was tough. I can usually think of something real quick, but this one I'm like
9 hellos scraped into a blackboard out of 10. That's kind of where I can go with that. So there's a lot of other creepier or worse things I could have said, but that's the one thing that popped into my head. So that's what I'm going to stick with.
All right. Star Wars could have also used more Ewan.
Star Wars could have used more of him too. Star Wars really should have been a story about Obi-Wan and not anybody else. But anyway, enough about that. Okay. Let's see what we recommend. What do you recommend, Chrissy? What's something similar that you would totally recommend?
Well, this goes back to the foreshadowing from earlier of I'm really bad. And when we start right before we do the recordings, you're always like, okay, what movie am I putting in for your similar? And I'm always like, oh yeah, I forgot I have to do that. So like this time I tried to think ahead of time of like, I'm gonna be prepared and I'm gonna know this. So I like really thought about it, and it just kept coming back to this. And I'm like, well, kind of also maybe The Haunting of Bly Manor, but no, The Haunting of Hill House for sure, because it has those same elements of like there's things appearing and someone seeing something and they're having conversations with people, but it's like you find out they weren't actually there, but was it a ghost or was it a figment? And it's that thing of like you have people in the Haunting of Hill House who like has the ability to kind of sense things or see things in a similar way almost to The Shining. And there were a lot of very parallels, and I felt like it looked visually very similar in my brain to Dr. Sleep. And then come to find out, the director of The Haunting of Hill House, Mike Flanagan, is the same one who did Dr. Sleep. So good job. They were connected in my brain, not even knowing that information.
Yep, that is correct. So I mean, it's very obvious that Mike Flanagan has a certain style, which he has directed other Stephen King related properties. So, and he's got another one in the works. So if
nice.
You like this, you might have to check out those other things and see what you think of them, I guess.
Did you like 1408?
I did. Did you not?
It wasn't one of my favorites.
Okay. So this is one that I saw in theaters, and I think I might have seen it twice. Because like I get it. You know what's really funny about this? This feels like a pandemic movie. This is a movie that has
it does.
Like, it has a cast of like 3 or 4 people. Realistically, like 2. Basically, John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson. But there's other people that kind of drip in and out, and
I like that drip in and out.
The drip, they just kind of drip. Anyway, what's funny about it? It's a Stephen King story. It is a story about a writer.
Yeah.
And It has a father daughter dynamic. It has a father family dynamic issue that in this case the child died, which basically split the family and made him kind of a shitty person, a grumpy, angry writer person. And he gets he reviews haunted places, and it happens to this hotel that he's at. I can't remember what it's something like the Dolphin or something. I can't remember the name of it. But the only rule that he has is not to go in, be near, exist in room 1408, and he does anyway, and it starts to kind of go crazy. So this also has a hotel doing things to you that's creepy element or messing with your psyche kind of thing. So this to me probably has more alignment to The Shining than it does Dr. Sleep, but it was something that just kind of popped into my head, and I was like, oh yeah, it kind of reminds me of some of that stuff. And it's sort of a fun little, like, I always argue it as like a carnival game movie. It's meant to entertain you, to make you think very briefly and just kind of get in your face and be done. Like, this is that. It's not a heavy thinker. And I like it. I don't know. I like that movie. I don't care whether you think it's hot trash or not, Chrissy. And it doesn't matter.
I believe I said, I don't remember what I said, but I think I said something that wasn't my favorite.
Yes. That's right.
I don't think that means I thought it was hot trash.
I will extrapolate that into whatever I want, and that's I feel like you hate it.
You are allowed to do that.
I feel I'm allowed to do that. So those are kind of our recommendations. Mm-hmm. And with that, I think we're probably going to wrap there. I mean, we watched The Shining, we watched Dr. Sleep. What else do you want for nothing?
Well, and then you talked horror to me.
Yeah, so thank you for talking horror to me, Chrissy. And I guess until next time, stay spooky. I don't know what catchphrase do we have. You got to come up with some.
Don't get murdered. That's what we.
Yeah. Don't scream too loud. I don't know. What do you say to that? But anyway, thanks for talking horror to me. And until next time.
Bye. Goodbye now.
Bye now.
Bye now. Goodbye.